Captain David Chen stood in the observation deck of the Galactic Council station, watching ships from 100 different worlds drift past the massive windows. He had been the first human to make contact with alien life 6 months ago, and now he served as Earth's representative to the wider galaxy. The station was a marvel of engineering, a spinning wheel 3 kilometers across that housed thousands of beings from across the stars. David had learned many things in his time here, but today would teach him something he never expected. The cafeteria was on the lower level, a vast space where species from across the galaxy gathered to share meals and conversation. David walked through the doors and immediately felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon him. The human had become something of a curiosity among the alien population, though most were polite about their staring. He made his way to the food dispensers, a wall of machines that could produce nutritional paste tailored to any species' biological needs. Beside him, a tall insectoid alien named Crix clicked his mandibles in what David had learned was a greeting. Crix belonged to the Theron species, peaceful traders who had been part of the council for over 300 years. His compound eyes reflected the light in strange patterns, and his 4 arms moved with surprising grace as he operated his own food dispenser. "Good morning, David Chen," Crix said, his voice produced by specialized breathing spiracles that created surprisingly clear English. The translator implant in David's ear helped fill in any gaps. "I trust your rest cycle was adequate." "Morning, Crix," David replied with a smile. "Slept well enough, still getting used to the artificial gravity in my quarters." He collected his tube of nutritional paste, a bland beige substance that contained everything the human body needed, but none of what the human soul craved. He had been eating this stuff for months now, and he desperately missed real food. They found seats at a long table where several other aliens were already eating. There was Velna, a floating jellyfish-like creature from a water world who consumed her food through absorption. Beside her sat Gorth, a massive rock-like being who barely needed to eat at all, sustaining himself through some kind of mineral absorption process David didn't fully understand. The diversity of life in the galaxy was staggering, and David had learned that eating habits varied even more than appearances. "I have been meaning to ask," Crix said as he squeezed his own nutrient paste into a feeding pouch. "What do humans eat on their homeworld before you had access to our universal nutrition systems?" David paused, his tube halfway to his mouth. It was an innocent question, but something about the way the entire table suddenly went quiet made him nervous. Every alien at the table had stopped eating and was watching him with whatever sensory organs they possessed. Even Velna's gentle pulsing had stilled. "Well," David said carefully, "we eat lots of different things. Fruits, vegetables, grains." He watched their reactions, but they seemed to find this acceptable. Most species ate some form of plant matter, he had learned. "And meat," he added. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Crix's mandibles froze mid-click. Velna's entire body flashed a deep purple color that David had learned indicated shock or distress. Gorth made a grinding sound like stones scraping together. Around the cafeteria, David noticed that their conversation had caught the attention of nearby tables, and aliens were turning to listen. "Meat?" Crix repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "You mean the flesh of other living creatures?" "Yes," David said slowly, confusion creeping into his voice. "Is that unusual?" The cafeteria had gone almost completely silent now. Hundreds of aliens were staring at the human with expressions that ranged from shock to horror to morbid fascination. David felt his face growing hot under their scrutiny. A new voice joined the conversation, smooth and melodic. "Forgive us, human David. We do not mean to be rude." The speaker was Ambassador Plina, a tall, willowy creature with pale blue skin and enormous eyes. She was one of the senior members of the council and had been kind to David during his orientation. "But you must understand, in all the known galaxy, there are only 3 species that consume animal flesh. 2 of them are considered dangerous predators that we avoid, and the third was driven to extinction by their own violent nature thousands of years ago. David's stomach dropped. You're telling me that out of all the species in the galaxy, almost none of them eat meat? That is correct, Plina said, gliding closer to the table. Other aliens were gathering now, forming a crowd around the human. The vast majority of intelligent species evolved from herbivorous or photosynthetic organisms. The consumption of other sentient beings' flesh is considered deeply disturbing by most civilized races. But we don't eat sentient beings, David protested. We eat animals, non-intelligent creatures that we raise specifically for food. Even as he said it, he realized how it might sound to species that had never known such practices. Crix's compound eyes seemed to bulge slightly. You raise living creatures for the specific purpose of killing and eating them? Well, when you put it that way, David muttered. He looked around at the sea of shocked faces and felt a desperate need to explain. Look, it's not as bad as it sounds. Humans are omnivores. We evolved to eat both plants and animals. For most of our history, we needed meat to survive. It's only recently that we've had the technology to get all our nutrients from other sources. What kinds of animals? Someone in the crowd asked. David couldn't see who had spoken. Lots of kinds, David admitted. Cattle, pigs, chickens, fish, sheep. Some cultures eat different things. In some places, people eat insects or reptiles or... A wave of horrified sounds washed through the crowd. Several aliens actually backed away from the table. Velna had turned an even deeper shade of purple and was pulsing erratically. Only Gorth seemed unaffected, but then again, the rock being didn't seem to have much capacity for emotional expression. You consume multiple species? Plina asked, her melodic voice strained. How many different types of creatures do humans eat? David thought about it. Between livestock, game animals, fish, shellfish, and all the various insects consumed in different cultures, the number was staggering. Hundreds, he finally said. Maybe thousands if you count all the different species of fish and insects. The cafeteria erupted in a chaos of alien voices, all speaking at once in a dozen different languages. The translator in David's ear struggled to keep up with the cacophony. He caught fragments of conversations, words like predator, savage, and barbaric floating through the noise. Please, everyone, calm down, Plina said, her voice cutting through the din with surprising authority. The crowd quieted, though the tension in the air remained thick. She turned back to David, and for the first time since he had met her, he saw something like fear in her enormous eyes. Human David, I must ask you a very important question. Do humans still eat meat? Or is this something from your past? David hesitated. He could lie, but what would be the point? They would find out eventually, and dishonesty would only make things worse. Yes, he said quietly, many humans still eat meat. Some have chosen not to for ethical or environmental reasons, but meat is still a major part of most human diets. The silence that followed was deafening. David could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him, judging him, analyzing him, perhaps reevaluating everything they thought they knew about humanity. He had represented his species to the stars for 6 months, carefully building relationships and establishing Earth's place in the galactic community. And now, with a few honest answers about his diet, he might have destroyed everything. A small, furry alien near the front of the crowd spoke up, its voice high and trembling. Does this mean that humans are predators? Are we in danger? No, David said quickly, standing up from the table. Humans are not dangerous. We're peaceful. We come in friendship. Just because we eat meat doesn't mean we're violent or savage. But even as he said it, he could see the doubt in their faces. To species that had never known predation, that had evolved in peaceful harmony with their ecosystems, the very concept of killing to eat was alien and terrifying. Plina raised a slender hand, calling for silence once more. I think, she said carefully, that we need to learn more about human dietary practices before we make any judgments. Human David, would you be willing to give a presentation to the council to help us understand your species better? David swallowed hard. A presentation to the entire Galactic Council about what humans eat. It sounded like a nightmare, but what choice did he have? Yes, he said, I'll do it. The crowd began to disperse, aliens returning to their tables and their meals, though many continued to cast nervous glances in David's direction. Crix remained at the table, his mandibles working slowly as he processed what he had learned. I apologize if my question caused you distress, the insectoid said quietly. It's not your fault, David replied, sinking back into his chair. I should have realized this would be an issue. I just never thought about how different we might be. Different is not necessarily bad, Crix said, though he didn't sound entirely convinced. Perhaps when the council understands the context, they will be less alarmed. David nodded, but inside, he wasn't so sure. He thought about Earth, about the cattle ranches and chicken farms, the fishing boats and hunting lodges. He thought about his grandmother's pot roast, his father's barbecued ribs, the sushi restaurant he loved in downtown Seattle. All the foods that made life worth living, that brought families together, that were woven into the fabric of human culture. How could he explain all of that to species that found the very concept repulsive? He spent the rest of the day in his quarters, preparing for the presentation. The council had scheduled it for the following week, which gave him time to gather information and plan his approach. He sent messages back to Earth, requesting data about human dietary history, nutritional requirements, and cultural significance of food. The responses came quickly, his superiors on Earth clearly aware of the delicate situation he was in. As he worked, David couldn't shake the memory of the horror in the aliens' eyes. He had read plenty of science fiction as a kid, stories about humans meeting aliens and discovering vast differences between species. But somehow he had never imagined that something as basic as eating would be the thing that set them apart. It seemed so fundamental, so obvious. Of course humans ate meat. They always had. It was part of what made them human. But now, looking at it through alien eyes, he could see how it might appear. Species that had never known the hunt, never developed the instinct to kill, would naturally find such behavior shocking. To them, humans must seem like monsters, creatures that casually murdered other beings for pleasure. The fact that humans didn't see it that way, that they had rationalized and normalized the practice over millions of years of evolution, wouldn't make it any less disturbing to species that had evolved differently. The week passed quickly, and before David knew it, he was standing in the council chambers, facing representatives from 200 different species. The chamber was a massive amphitheater, with seats rising in tiers on all sides. At the center was a small platform where speakers stood, and that's where David found himself now, his hands sweating and his heart pounding. Ambassador Plina stood at the head of the council, her blue skin seeming to glow under the chamber's lights. We are gathered today to learn more about the dietary practices of humanity, she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. Human David Chen has agreed to educate us about his species' relationship with food. I ask that everyone listen with open minds and remember that diversity is the foundation of our great council. David stepped forward, activating the holographic display he had prepared. Images of Earth appeared in the air above him, showing forests and oceans, cities and farmland. Thank you, Ambassador, he began, his voice steadier than he felt. I want to start by explaining how humans evolved, because I think it will help you understand why we eat the way we do. He brought up an image of early human ancestors, primitive hominids on the African savanna. Millions of years ago, our ancestors were small, relatively weak creatures living in a dangerous world. We didn't have sharp claws or tough hides. We weren't fast runners or strong fighters. What we had was intelligence and adaptability. To survive, we learned to eat whatever was available, plants and animals both. The council watched in silence as David walked them through human evolutionary history. He showed them how the development of tools had allowed early humans to hunt more effectively, how the consumption of meat had provided the protein and nutrients needed for larger brains to develop. He explained how agriculture had changed everything, allowing humans to settle in one place and build civilizations, but how meat had remained an important part of the diet even then. The key thing to understand, David said, is that for humans, eating meat isn't about violence or cruelty. It's about survival. For most of our history, we needed meat to live. And even now, when we have alternatives, the practice is deeply embedded in our culture. He showed images of family dinners, holiday feasts, cultural celebrations, all centered around food. What we eat is connected to who we are, to our history, and our relationships with each other. A voice called out from the upper tiers of the chamber. But surely, now that you have the technology to synthesize nutrients, there is no need to continue killing animals? David nodded. That's true, and many humans have made that choice. We call them vegetarians or vegans, and their numbers are growing. But changing billions of years of evolutionary programming isn't easy. The taste of meat, the satisfaction it provides, these things are hardwired into our biology. And our cultures have built traditions around these foods that go back thousands of years. He could see that some of the council members were beginning to understand, though many still looked disturbed. He pressed on, showing them the precautions humans took, the regulations and standards that govern food production. We don't take the lives of animals lightly, he said. We have laws to ensure they're treated humanely. We're constantly working to improve our practices, to reduce suffering, because even though we eat meat, we're not monsters. We're capable of compassion and empathy. Another voice, this one belonging to a reptilian creature David didn't recognize. You say you feel compassion, yet you kill. How do you reconcile this contradiction? It was a good question, one that philosophers and ethicists on Earth had been debating for centuries. It's not easy, David admitted. Many humans struggle with this. Some choose to stop eating meat because of it. Others find ways to rationalize it, to separate the animal from the food. And some simply accept it as a part of nature, neither good nor evil, just the way things are. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. I think what makes us human is that we can ask these questions at all. We're the only species on Earth that has the capacity to consider the ethics of our own survival. That has to count for something. The presentation continued for another hour, with David answering questions and providing information. He talked about the different types of meat humans consumed, the methods of preparation, the cultural significance of various dishes. Some of the questions were hostile, some were genuinely curious, and some seemed to come from a place of morbid fascination. Through it all, David did his best to be honest, while also presenting humanity in the best possible light. Finally, Ambassador Plina called for a recess. David stepped down from the platform, exhausted and emotionally drained. Crix met him at the edge of the chamber, his mandibles clicking softly. You did well, the insectoid said. Better than I expected. You spoke with honesty and dignity. Thanks, David said wearily. Do you think it made a difference? Crix's compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights in swirling patterns. Some minds were open today, others remain closed. This is the nature of any great revelation, but you planted seeds of understanding, and perhaps that is enough. David nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed. The galaxy knew about humanity's dark secret now, their predatory nature. How would that knowledge shape Earth's future among the stars? Would they be feared, shunned, or perhaps grudgingly accepted as the strange carnivores from a distant world? Only time would tell, but David knew that nothing would ever be quite the same. Over the next few days, David noticed a change in how the other aliens treated him. Some avoided him entirely, going out of their way to stay clear of the human predator. Others approached him with renewed curiosity, asking more questions about Earth and human culture. A few, like Crix, seemed to accept him just as they had before, judging him by his actions rather than his dietary choices. The council was still deliberating on their official response to the revelations about human diet. There were factions calling for Earth to be placed under observation, for humanity to be classified as a potentially dangerous species. Others argued that humans had proven themselves peaceful and that their eating habits were a private matter. The debate raged in chambers and corridors, in official meetings and informal gatherings. David spent his time trying to bridge the gap between human and alien understanding. He invited small groups to his quarters for discussions, answering their questions honestly and patiently. He showed them videos from Earth, documentaries about farming and cooking, about the relationships between humans and the animals they raised. Some found it horrifying, others fascinating, but all of them came away with a deeper understanding of the complexity of the issue. One evening, David received an unexpected visitor. It was Gorth, the massive rock-like being who had been at the table when the whole situation began. The creature moved with slow, ponderous steps, its body scraping slightly against the doorframe as it entered David's quarters. "Human, David," Gorth said, his voice like grinding stone. "I wish to speak with you." "Of course," David said, gesturing to a reinforced chair that could support the being's weight. "What's on your mind?" Gorth settled onto the chair with a sound like an avalanche in miniature. "I have been thinking about what you said, about predation and survival. My species does not eat as yours does. We absorb minerals from our environment, a passive process that harms nothing. We have always considered this the proper way of things, the civilized way." He paused, and David got the impression the being was choosing his words carefully. "But I have also been studying Earth's history. Your world is violent in ways mine never was. Active volcanoes, massive storms, tectonic upheavals. Your planet shaped you to be survivors, to be fighters. Perhaps your diet is simply another adaptation to that harsh environment." David felt a surge of gratitude toward the alien. "That's exactly right," he said. "Earth is a dangerous place. We had to become tough to survive there. And part of that toughness came from being able to extract maximum nutrition from whatever sources we could find." "Then perhaps," Gorth said slowly, "the problem is not with humans, but with our own limited perspective. We assume that our way was the only civilized way, that any species that developed differently must be barbaric. But the galaxy is vast and varied. Why should we expect all life to follow the same path?" It was the most hopeful thing David had heard since the whole situation began. "Do you really think the council will see it that way?" "Some will, some will not," Gorth replied. "But I will speak for you when the final deliberations come. Others will as well. You have allies, human David, though you may not know all their names." After Gorth left, David felt lighter than he had in days. Maybe there was hope after all. Maybe humanity could find its place among the stars, not despite their differences, but because of them. The following week brought another unexpected development. A delegation arrived at the station from one of the galaxy's most reclusive species, the Vorath. They were a warrior race, rarely seen outside their own territory, and their arrival caused quite a stir. They were massive creatures, easily 3 meters tall, with thick, armor-like skin and powerful limbs that ended in sharp claws. Their leader, a scarred veteran named Kretch, requested a private meeting with David. They met in a secure conference room, just the two of them. Kretch towered over the human, his yellow eyes studying David with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. "So," the Vorath said, his voice a deep rumble, "you are the human who has shocked the soft, civilized races with his terrible diet." David tensed, unsure where this was going. That's one way to put it. To his surprise, Kretch's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "Good. The galaxy has grown soft, human David. Too many species content to float through life, absorbing nutrients and philosophizing about peace. They have forgotten what it takes to survive in a universe that does not care about their comfort. You're saying you understand why humans eat meat? Understand? Kretsch laughed, a sound like rocks tumbling down a mountainside. Human. The Vorath are the other predator species in this galaxy. We too evolved as hunters, though we no longer consume raw flesh as our ancestors did. When I heard about the panic over your dietary habits, I knew I had to meet you. Finally, another species that understands the value of strength. David's mind reeled. The Vorath were legendary, the only species in the Council that maintained a significant military force. Most civilized races had abandoned warfare millennia ago, but the Vorath had held on to their warrior culture, arguing that someone needed to protect the galaxy from external threats. They were respected but also feared, kept at arm's length by the more peaceful species. And now they were claiming kinship with humanity. I'm not sure we're as similar as you think, David said carefully. Humans value strength, yes, but we also value compassion, art, philosophy. We're not just warriors. Neither are we, Kretsch replied. The Vorath have poets and painters, dreamers and scientists, but we have not forgotten our roots. We remember what it took to climb to the top of our world's food chain, and we honor that struggle. He leaned forward, his massive frame somehow intimidating even while seated. The galaxy needs more species like ours, human David. Species that remember that survival sometimes requires hard choices, that strength is not inherently evil. David thought about that. There was truth in what Kretsch was saying, but also danger. The last thing humanity needed was to be associated with the galaxy's most feared warrior race. I appreciate your perspective, he said diplomatically, but humans aren't looking to position themselves as warriors in the galaxy. We came here seeking friendship and cooperation, not conflict. Of course, Kretsch said, though his tone suggested he didn't entirely believe it. But know this, human David. When the Council makes its final decision about your species, the Vorath will stand with you. We recognize the value of a people who understand both strength and compassion. The soft species may fear you now, but in time, they will come to appreciate what you bring to the galaxy. After Kretsch left, David sat alone in the conference room, trying to process everything. The situation was becoming more complex by the day. Humanity had gone from being an unknown curiosity to a controversial topic that divided the galaxy. Their eating habits, something so basic and unremarkable to humans themselves, had become a defining characteristic in the eyes of alien civilizations. It was absurd and serious in equal measure. David sent a report back to Earth, updating them on the latest developments. The response came from the Secretary General herself, a terse message expressing concern about the Vorath connection. Earth's leadership was worried that humanity might become pigeonholed as the galaxy's second warrior race, limiting their diplomatic options and potentially making other species more wary of them. They instructed David to continue emphasizing humanity's peaceful intentions while also acknowledging their evolutionary history. The day of the Council's final deliberation arrived with surprising speed. David found himself once again standing in the Great Chamber, but this time he was not alone. Dozens of other beings stood with him, aliens who had spoken in favor of humanity's admission to the Council, despite the controversy. Crix was there, along with Gorth and several others David had come to know over the past weeks. Even Ambassador Plina stood nearby, her presence a silent endorsement. The High Counselor, an ancient being whose species David had never learned to pronounce, floated at the center of the chamber. It was a creature of pure energy, contained within a specially designed force field, and its voice resonated directly in the minds of everyone present. "We have deliberated long on the matter of humanity," the High Counselor said, its thoughts clear and precise. "Their dietary practices have raised concerns about their fundamental nature, their capacity for violence, and their compatibility with galactic civilization. These concerns are not without merit. However, we must also consider the evidence of their actions. The chamber fell silent as the High Counselor continued. Since making contact with our civilization, humans have shown nothing but peaceful intent. They have respected our laws, engaged in honest dialogue, and demonstrated a willingness to learn and adapt. Their representative, David Chen, has answered our questions with candor and dignity, even when those questions were uncomfortable or hostile. David felt his heart pounding in his chest. This was it, the moment that would determine Earth's future among the stars. Furthermore, the High Counselor went on, we must acknowledge our own prejudices. For too long, we have assumed that our way of life is the only civilized way, that any deviation from our norms represents a threat. But the galaxy is vast, and life takes many forms. Who are we to judge a species by their diet when their actions speak of peace? A murmur ran through the chamber, some supportive, some dissenting. The High Counselor raised a tendril of energy, calling for silence. Therefore, the Council has reached a decision. Humanity will be granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council, with full membership to be considered after a probationary period of 10 standard cycles. During this time, Earth will be expected to demonstrate its commitment to peace and cooperation. Additionally, humans serving on Council vessels and stations will be required to consume only synthesized nutrients while on duty to avoid causing distress to other species. David felt a wave of relief wash over him. It wasn't perfect, but it was far better than rejection or isolation. Earth would have its chance to prove itself to the galaxy, to show that humans were more than just their diet. He bowed to the High Counselor, a gesture of respect that transcended species. On behalf of humanity, I accept these terms. We will prove ourselves worthy of your trust. The chamber erupted in a mix of applause and dissent, some species celebrating the decision, while others clearly disagreed. But the verdict was final, and humanity had secured its place among the stars, however tenuous that place might be. In the days that followed, David worked with the Council to establish protocols for Earth's integration into galactic society. Ships would be sent to establish formal diplomatic relations. Trade agreements would be negotiated. Cultural exchanges would be arranged. It was the beginning of a new era for humanity, though David knew the road ahead would not be easy. One evening, as he stood once more in the observation deck, watching the ships drift past, Crix joined him. The insectoid had become a true friend over the past weeks, standing by David even when many others kept their distance. "You changed the galaxy today," Crix said, his mandibles clicking softly. "Whether for better or worse, only time will tell. But you made us question our assumptions, and that is valuable in itself." "I just told the truth," David replied, "about who we are, where we came from, what we need to survive. I never expected it to be so controversial." "The truth often is," Crix said, "especially when it challenges deeply held beliefs. But consider this, David. Every species in the Council has something that others find strange or disturbing. The Theran molt our exoskeletons in public, which many species find disgusting. The Vel absorb nutrients from decaying organic matter. The Quarren reproduce by temporarily merging their consciousness, which most beings find deeply unsettling. We all have our peculiarities. So you're saying humans eating meat isn't really that different? I am saying that difference is the nature of life itself. What matters is not our diets or our breeding habits or our appearance. What matters is how we treat each other, how we build civilization together despite our differences." Crix turned to face David, his compound eyes reflecting the starlight. "You have shown the galaxy that humans are capable of great wisdom and compassion, even if you are also capable of consuming the flesh of other creatures. That is enough." David smiled, feeling truly hopeful for the first time since this whole situation began. "Thank you, Crix, for everything." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the cosmos spin slowly past the windows. Somewhere out there was Earth, that blue marble of a world where humans had learned to survive against all odds. And now, those same humans were taking their place among the stars, bringing with them all their strange habits and contradictions, their capacity for both violence and compassion, their endless ability to adapt and overcome. The galaxy would never be quite the same, David reflected, and perhaps that was exactly what it needed. 3 months into Earth's provisional membership, the first human ships began arriving at the Council Station. They came bearing gifts from Earth, samples of human culture and technology to share with their new alien neighbors. David watched the arrival ceremonies with pride, seeing his fellow humans step out onto the station for the first time, their faces full of wonder at the diverse array of species surrounding them. Among the new arrivals was Dr. Lisa Park, a xenobiologist who had been studying the Council's database of alien species since first contact. She sought David out immediately, eager to learn everything he could teach her about interacting with their new neighbors. They met in his quarters, and David found himself grateful for the company of another human after months of being the only one on the station. "So it's true what they say about the food situation?" Lisa asked, looking at the tube of nutritional paste on David's desk with obvious distaste. "I'm afraid so," David replied with a rueful smile. "No steaks, no burgers, no sushi, just nutrient paste calibrated for human biology. You get used to it eventually, sort of." Lisa made a face. "I brought some snacks from Earth. Contraband, I guess you could call it. Dried fruit, nuts, some energy bars. Nothing with meat, but at least it has flavor. I'll share if you promise not to report me." David laughed, the first genuine laugh he'd had in weeks. "Your secret is safe with me, though you should know that the aliens are very curious about human food. We might end up having to explain the entire history of Earth cuisine before long." "I look forward to it," Lisa said, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "I've read all your reports, David. What you did here, helping the Council understand humanity despite their prejudices, it was incredible. You've opened the door for all of us." "I just did what needed to be done," David said modestly, "though there were moments when I thought I'd ruined everything. When they first found out about our diet, you should have seen their faces. I've never felt so alien in my life, and I'm literally surrounded by aliens. But you persevered, and that's what matters." Lisa leaned forward, her expression becoming serious. "I've been thinking a lot about what this means for humanity. We're the predators of the galaxy, the meat-eaters, the species that kills to survive. That's our identity now, whether we like it or not. How do we move forward with that?" It was a question David had been pondering himself. "I think we embrace it," he said slowly, working through his thoughts as he spoke. "Not in an aggressive way, but honestly. We acknowledge what we are, where we came from, and we show them that being predators doesn't make us monsters. We can be both fierce and gentle, both hunters and philosophers. We contain multitudes, and that's our strength." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "Contain multitudes. I like that. Walt Whitman would approve." Over the following weeks, more humans arrived on the station. Engineers, scientists, diplomats, and cultural ambassadors, all eager to engage with the wider galaxy. The station's population of 5 humans grew to 50, then 100. They formed a small community within the larger alien society, supporting each other and representing their species with pride. David found his role changing as more humans arrived. He was no longer the sole representative of his species, no longer bearing the entire weight of Earth's reputation on his shoulders. Instead, he became a mentor and guide, helping new arrivals navigate the complex social dynamics of the station. He taught them which species were friendly, which were standoffish, and which were actively hostile to humanity's presence. The culinary incident, as it came to be known, occurred about 6 months after Lisa's arrival. A group of human engineers, working late on a repair project, had decided to prepare a meal in their quarters using supplies smuggled from Earth. They hadn't realized that the station's ventilation system would carry the smell throughout an entire section of the habitat. The aroma of cooking bacon had sent dozens of aliens into a panic, convinced that humans were slaughtering creatures aboard the station. David had to spend hours explaining and apologizing, assuring the frightened aliens that no living beings had been harmed, that the meat had been brought from Earth, already preserved. It became a diplomatic incident, with formal complaints filed and emergency sessions of the council called. In the end, strict regulations were put in place regarding human food practices on the station, with designated areas where humans could prepare and consume traditional Earth foods without disturbing others. But something interesting happened in the aftermath of the incident. Some of the braver aliens, curious about what could produce such a powerful aroma, asked if they could learn more about human cooking. David organized a series of cultural presentations, complete with videos of Earth's diverse culinary traditions. The aliens watched in fascination and horror as humans prepared everything from delicate French pastries to elaborate Chinese banquets, from simple American barbecues to complex Indian curries. "I still do not understand the appeal," Crix admitted after watching a video of a traditional Thanksgiving dinner. "The amount of effort that goes into killing, preparing, and cooking these creatures seems excessive. Why not simply consume nutrient paste?" "Because food is more than just fuel for humans," David explained. "It's culture, it's tradition, it's love. When a human prepares a meal for someone, they're showing care and affection. When families gather for holiday meals, they're reinforcing bonds and creating memories. The food itself is only part of it." "Fascinating," Velna pulsed, her jellyfish-like body rippling with interest. "So the act of consumption is social, not merely biological?" "Exactly," Lisa added, having joined the presentation. "Think about your most important cultural ceremonies. Don't they involve specific rituals, specific behaviors that define your species' identity? For humans, sharing meals is one of those rituals." Slowly, grudgingly, the aliens began to understand. It didn't make them comfortable with humanity's diet, but it gave them context, a framework for comprehending why humans did what they did. The fear began to fade, replaced by wary acceptance. Humans were predators, yes, but they were civilized predators, creatures that had transcended their violent origins without completely abandoning them. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The Quiloth, a species of small, rabbit-like creatures that were among the most timid in the council, approached David with a request. They wanted to learn about human agriculture, specifically how humans managed livestock. The Quiloth had their own environmental challenges on their homeworld, with rapidly reproducing pest species that were destroying their crops. They wondered if human animal management techniques might offer solutions. David worked with them for weeks, sharing knowledge about sustainable farming, population control, and ecosystem management. The Quiloth were horrified by some aspects of human farming, but they adapted the techniques to their own needs, developing humane methods of population control that didn't involve killing. In gratitude, they became some of humanity's strongest advocates in the council, speaking up whenever other species raised concerns about human nature. It was a lesson David took to heart. Humanity had knowledge and experience that the galaxy needed, insights born from millions of years of predatory evolution. Their understanding of competition, of resource management, of survival in hostile environments, these were things that peaceful, herbivorous species had never needed to develop. By sharing that knowledge, humans could prove their value to the galactic community. The Council's attitude toward humanity continued to evolve. When pirates from outside Council space attacked a trade convoy, it was human security officers who responded most effectively, their combat training and tactical thinking saving numerous alien lives. When a plague threatened a remote colony, human doctors drew on their species' long history of fighting diseases to develop a treatment. Time and again, humans demonstrated that their predatory nature came with advantages, skills, and perspectives that complemented those of other species. A year into Earth's provisional membership, the council voted to advance the timeline for full membership consideration. Humanity had proven itself not just peaceful, but valuable, bringing unique strengths to the galactic community. The final vote was scheduled for the following month, and David found himself cautiously optimistic about the outcome. The night before the vote, he sat in his quarters with a group of both human and alien friends. They had shared a meal together, humans eating their synthesized nutrients, while the aliens consumed their own species-appropriate foods. But the act of gathering, of sharing space and conversation, that transcended biology. "Tomorrow we make history," Crick said, raising his feeding pouch in what had become a tradition among the group, a toast without alcohol, but with no less significance. "Humanity will take its place among the stars. If the vote goes our way," David cautioned, though he couldn't help but smile. "It will," Gorth rumbled with certainty. "You have proven yourselves 100 times over. Even the skeptics must see that now." "We couldn't have done it without friends like you," Lisa said, her voice thick with emotion. "You took a chance on us when we were unknown. You defended us when others called us barbarians. Whatever happens tomorrow, please know that we're grateful." The vote the next day was not unanimous, but it was decisive. 217 species voted in favor of granting Earth full membership in the Galactic Council. 43 voted against, and 19 abstained. It was enough, more than enough. Humanity was officially part of the galactic community, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. David stood in the council chamber, feeling the weight of billions of humans back on Earth, watching through live broadcast, and spoke on behalf of his species. "We accept this honor with humility and determination. Humanity knows we are different from most species in this chamber. We evolved as predators on a harsh world, and that history has shaped us in ways both good and bad. But we also evolved the capacity for compassion, for cooperation, for dreaming of a better future. We bring both our strengths and our flaws to this council, and we pledge to work alongside all of you to build a galaxy of peace and prosperity." The chamber erupted in applause, though David noticed that some sections remained silent. The opponents of humanity's membership had not been convinced, and likely never would be. But that was okay. Humanity didn't need universal love, just acceptance and the opportunity to prove themselves. In the years that followed, Earth flourished as a member of the Galactic Council. Human colonies spread across the stars, carefully regulated to ensure they didn't disrupt local ecosystems. Human technology merged with alien innovations, creating wonders neither could have achieved alone. And slowly, gradually, the galaxy grew accustomed to having predators among them. The question of diet never fully went away. There were still species that found human eating habits disturbing, still debates about the ethics of meat consumption, still calls for humanity to abandon their ancient practices entirely. But humans had learned to live with the controversy, to accept that they would always be different, always be the species that others looked at with a mixture of fascination and unease. David eventually left his position as ambassador, returning to Earth after 5 years on the council station. He had done what he set out to do, establishing humanity's place among the stars and proving that predators and prey could coexist peacefully. Other humans took up the work, building on the foundation he had laid, creating deeper connections with alien species. On his last day at the station, David stood once more in the observation deck, watching the cosmos spin past the windows. Crix joined him, as he had so many times before, the insectoid ambassador having become perhaps his closest friend in the galaxy. "You are really leaving?" Crix asked, though he already knew the answer.